Well, as the situation in Gaza worsens, the director of the United Nations Children's Fund is warning of a looming disaster. Christine Russell says the devastating tally of the weeks-long war is taking its toll in Gaza, adding that over 3,000 children have been killed thus far. Russell says very little clean water remains in Gaza and is quickly running out. She called on the UN Security Council to adopt a resolution that calls for a ceasefire and allows safe humanitarian access into the region. And here now is Samuel Tadros, a Middle East scholar and former senior fellow at the Hudson Institute Center for Religious Freedom. Samuel, great to be with you today. Let's talk more about the humanitarian situation in Gaza right now. How dire is it?
Thank you for having me. It's pretty dire. The people of Gaza today, of course, don't have access to the outside world in terms of aid going on, despite the United States working with the government in Egypt and with the Israeli government to allow some aid to go on. There's still significant concern about the humanitarian situation. Aid isn't flowing at the level that people need. At the same time, of course, the United States, Israel, and other European countries are worried about how this aid is to be used. In the past, we've had Hamas confiscate this aid, use it for its own fighters instead of giving it to civilians. So you want to send more aid, at the same time, you're worried about what's going on and how it will be distributed.
Yeah, I'm going to jump off of that, Samuel. I was going to ask you about that. We know that Israel recently agreed to allow, that is, 100 trucks of humanitarian aid into Gaza each day. Do you think that will be enough? And again, let's touch a little bit more on, will that assistance really get to the people who need it?
That's the million-dollar question. The reality, of course, is Hamas is not just a terrorist organization that operates in Gaza. It's also the governing body of Gaza. The health ministry, the education ministry, all of the government in Gaza, since they completely kicked out the Fatah movement, the Palestinian Authority, they have been in control. So they control every layer of life in Gaza. People in Gaza have been complaining for years about not receiving the aid that is sent to them, about Hamas confiscating it and taking it into their own coffers and using it for their own purposes. So that's a serious worry. And of course, without anyone managing this, there's no way to guarantee that this takes place.
Yeah, it is such a concerning situation over there. Although, some good news, as we mentioned, that those who've been trying to flee Gaza are now being able to cross into Egypt. Of course, just some of those people are allowed to go into Egypt. Can you talk to us, Samuel, about how critical that Rafah Crossing is in terms of maybe getting aid into Palestine and getting people out? And also curious why Egypt didn't open the crossing earlier.
Definitely. Rafah is the only crossing available outside of the Israeli crossings, which are, of course, closed right now due to the military operation. So the only way out of Gaza is through Rafah into the Egyptian Sinai. Egypt doesn't welcome the Palestinians coming. There are several concerns there. There's a concern about the fact that they might come and not leave, that this might be the end of that situation and the solution to the Gaza problem by just throwing them into Egypt. Egypt is worried about its own economic conditions. Egypt is in a deep economic crisis currently. So the 2 million Gazans fleeing into the country is not the most welcome thing. We're also worried about whether if people come from Gaza, this would allow Hamas militants to infiltrate. Egypt has dealt with a deep terrorism problem in Sinai for the last decade. There's a fear that they would be working with these guys, that they would attack Israel from Egypt, and thus Egypt would get dragged into the conflict. Concerning the people that dual nationals, Egypt, of course, has been stopping that in order to get basically concessions from the West, from the United States, from other European countries. Egypt, because of its economic crisis, is looking for aid. So in a sense, allowing dual citizens out is a bargaining chip for the Egyptian government to use to deal with its own problems.
Well, Samuel, we have to leave it right there. So much we can talk about. Thank you so much for coming on today and for your insights. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.